but it's whenever I'm off the field, of course, like, I'm excited that I see my dad.
Brown secondary, 21 of 26 yesterday.
Shedeur Sanders just turned in one of the sharpest practices of Brown's training camp, and it happened right after his father walked onto that field. Coach Prime showed up in Berea for the first time since summer, and not long after that visit, Shedeur was picking apart the Cleveland secondary, 21 of 26. That is not a coincidence, and today we are breaking down exactly what happened before, during, and after that visit, because the timeline is one the Browns front office is paying very close attention to. Let's start with what actually happened, because the details matter here. Every year, around this point in camp, storylines start to separate the guys who are locked in from the guys who are getting worn down, and this week gave us one of the clearest signals yet about which category Shedeur falls into. Shedeur spoke to reporters before day 4 of Brown's training camp, and one of the first things that came up was his father. He told reporters he hadn't seen Coach Prime since sometime in the summer, and when asked how exciting it was to have him around camp, Shedeur didn't try to play it cool. He said it flat out. It was good. He was excited. But here's the part people are glossing over. In the same breath, he drew a hard line. He said that on the field, nothing outside of it matters. Not the visit, not the noise, not anything happening off to the side. He said he's locked in every day on the practice itself, and it's only once he's off the field that things like seeing his dad even register. That is not the answer of a guy who's distracted by a family visit. That's the answer of a guy who compartmentalizes at a level most rookies twice his experience haven't figured out yet. So you had this personal, emotional moment, his father back in the building after months apart, and instead of it pulling his focus, Shedeur used it as fuel and kept the two completely separate. Then, less than a day later, he goes out and puts together one of his cleanest practices of camp. 21 completions on 26 attempts. That's over 80%. In a training camp setting against your own starting caliber defense, that number gets attention. Now, correlation isn't automatically causation, and we're not going to sit here and pretend Shedeur needed his dad in the building to play well. He's shown flashes of this all camp, but when you line up the emotional context with the on-field results, it paints a picture of a guy who is settled, confident, and playing with a clear head heading into the part of camp that actually decides things. Pads go on soon, the preseason games are coming, and right as that pressure ramps up, here comes Coach Prime, and here comes a 21 for 26 day. Think about the timing of it, too. This isn't week 1 of camp, when everybody's fresh and the install is still simple. This is day 4, when the mental load starts stacking, when the install gets deeper, and when tired legs start to show up in ball placement. A quarterback who's dragging by day 4 usually shows it in his numbers. Shedeur didn't show any of that. If anything, the completion rate says the opposite. And it lines up almost perfectly with the one day his support system showed up in person. We'll get into the mental side of what's actually driving that number in a second, because it connects directly to something Shedeur said about how he's approaching this entire training camp differently than last year.
How was it to have posture the other day? How exciting was it? Yeah. It was good. Like, I'm overall focused every day by, like, the practice. So the outside, nothing else really matters, like, whenever I'm on the field and that. But it's whenever I'm off the field, of course, like, I'm excited that I see my dad. I ain't seen him in, like, I don't know, since the summer maybe. But, yeah, nothing matters when you between the lines.
I know things will intensify when pads come on, but how much work have you seen the defense giving you guys and the entire offense?
Yeah. We get great looks every day, and that's what I'm excited about going into the season, reviewing all the film from last year and mistakes I made, and just being able to recognize, have a better pre-snap, be able to recognize things better, and post-snap also. So the fact that our defense gives us a lot of different looks and everything is truly great that we're able to get that in practice.
When you're talking about pre-snap and post-snap, just the responsibilities in time adjusted to all that new information you had to absorb and implement this offseason, and how do you think you're coming along out on the practice field when you guys are going through these installs?
Yeah, so of course it's going to be good days, bad days. We always strive to have our best days every day, but I play better and I feel better whenever I have all the information. And
So if the emotional side isn't the whole story, what is actually fueling this level of production? Turns out Shedeur gave us the answer himself, and it has nothing to do with talent. When reporters brought up cadences and how Todd Monken has him running up to 10 different snap counts in a single game, Shedeur didn't talk about arm talent or athleticism. He talked about information. 10 different cadences is not a small ask for any quarterback, let alone one who's still adjusting to a brand new system in his second year in the league. That's 10 different rhythms he has to sell to the defense, 10 different timings his offensive line has to sync up with, and 10 different windows where one missed beat can blow up a whole play before the ball is even snapped. He said every rep matters, that even with guys who couldn't make it to his offseason work in Miami, the group still finds time after practice to build that trust and continuity. That's not a flashy answer, but it tells you exactly how he's built his game up to this point in camp. Then he was asked to compare this year's cadence load to what he ran back at Colorado, and his response is honestly one of the more telling things he said all camp. He said he doesn't even go down memory lane to Colorado anymore. He might catch a highlight here or there, but he said he's so locked into this season that thinking about the past doesn't help him or the team get where they're trying to go. If it's not helping the team win right now, in his words, it just doesn't make sense to think about it. That mindset is exactly why the 21 for 26 number carries extra weight. This isn't a guy leaning on old tape or resting on what worked in college. He's treating every single practice rep like it's brand new information he has to absorb, process, and execute under a completely different system with a completely different set of cadences and reads. He even said straight up that he plays better and feels better when he has all the information and knows exactly what's going on at all times, which is why he said he spends every hour focused on being the best quarterback and best leader he can be for this team. That's a guy who has completely rewired how he prepares. And when you combine that obsessive focus on the present with a personal grounding moment like his father showing up in Berea, you get a version of Shedeur that looked about as comfortable and in rhythm as he's looked all camp. The completion numbers back it up. It also explains why he's able to separate a personal visit from his on-field performance in the first place. If your preparation is built entirely around processing whatever's in front of you right now, today's defense, today's cadence, today's install, then something like a family visit doesn't have room to become a distraction. It just becomes one more piece of good news on a day that was already dialed in. That's a subtle difference, but it's the difference between a rookie who gets rattled by emotion and a guy who's figured out how to use it without losing focus. But there's another layer to this story, because while Shedeur was out here compartmentalizing and stacking good reps, the media narrative around him was trying to pull him in a completely different direction.
Todd Monken talked the other day about cadences and how he can have up to 10 different cadences in a game. How does that compare to last year when you were in the team and going back to Colorado? Did you have that many different?
Colorado, I can't even think. I don't even go down memory lane no more with Colorado anymore. I see a couple highlights a little there sometimes, but I'm so locked in on this year that I don't think about the years in the prior or live in the past, because that don't benefit or help.
Stop right there for a second, because this next part is where things get interesting. Reporters weren't just asking about football. They were trying to create a story that wasn't actually happening in that building. Throughout the presser, there was a clear attempt from reporters to frame this as some kind of tension story between Shedeur and Deshaun Watson. One question straight up asked if Shedeur tracks the competition like a race, judging who's ahead and who's behind day to day. Shedeur's response was short and direct. He said he's answered that exact question 1,000 times, that he focuses on himself and what he needs to do to get better, and that the race framing is something other people care about, not him. That answer matters because it's part of a bigger pattern this camp. It would have been easy for Shedeur to lean into the drama a little, to give reporters even a small opening they could turn into a headline. Instead, he gave them almost nothing to work with, which in its own way says more about where his head is at than a dramatic answer ever could. The person breaking down this footage pointed out that Browns media has repeatedly tried to manufacture division between Shedeur and Watson, and that it simply isn't landing the way they want it to. He referenced a moment where owner Jimmy Haslam reportedly brushed off a reporter, Tony Grossi, who was pushing that same divide narrative, essentially shutting the question down before it could gain traction. Whether that exchange looked exactly as dramatic as it's being described, the bigger point stands. The people inside that building, from ownership down to the players, are not engaging with the story reporters keep trying to write. And that's really the through line of this whole camp. Shedeur showing up, giving measured answers, refusing to take the bait on manufactured conflict, and then going out and performing at a high level regardless of what storyline the media wants to push. Combine that with a personal visit from his father, and you get a guy who, by every account, seems locked in, supported, and completely unbothered by outside noise. The 21 for 26 isn't happening in spite of everything going on around him. It's happening because none of it is actually getting to him. It's worth pointing out how consistent that has been. This wasn't the first time reporters tried to get him to bite on the Watson comparison, and by his own admission, it won't be the last. He said himself he's answered some version of that question 1,000 times. At a certain point, that consistency becomes its own signal. A guy who was actually rattled by the competition talk would eventually slip, get short, get defensive. Shedeur's answers have stayed the same length, the same tone, the same message, every single time it comes up. That kind of discipline under repeated questioning is its own form of preparation, and it's happening at the exact same time he's putting up his best completion numbers of camp. So where does that leave the quarterback competition, and what does a performance like this actually mean with pads set to go on soon and the preseason games right around the corner? That's where we go next.
I think it's absolutely great the way that Shedeur Sanders handled those questions. Cleveland Browns media might as well just forget it, because there's a lot of positivity surrounding the Cleveland Browns locker room. They keep trying to divide Shedeur and Deshaun Watson. We heard yesterday where Jimmy Haslam dang near gave a middle finger to Tony Grossi, you know what I'm saying? So it's all positivity, and you absolutely love it. I also love the fact that he spoke highly of the fact that he had a chance to see his father, Coach Prime, visit him as well. You can clearly see.
Here's the reality check nobody's talking about enough. This wasn't a random hot practice. This was the product of a very specific approach Shedeur has taken to this entire camp, and the numbers are starting to reflect it. 21 completions on 26 attempts is the kind of efficiency number that gets circulated inside a building, not just outside of it. It comes at a moment where the pressure is genuinely rising. Pads go on soon, and once that happens, camp shifts from evaluation through reps to evaluation through actual contact and physicality. Shedeur has said himself that he expects things to intensify once that switch flips, and he's framed his preparation specifically around having as much information as possible heading into it. It's also worth remembering who he's throwing to right now, because a completion percentage is only ever half the story. The other half is who's on the other end of those throws, and whether that chemistry is real or still being built. Shedeur talked about connecting with rookies Casey and Denzel Boston, saying he's genuinely excited to have them in the building and that their early success is going to compound over time. He credited the front office for bringing them in and said they've already earned their place in what he called the standard of that room. On top of that, he talked about enjoying the different personalities on the revamped offensive line, saying that variety has created a different atmosphere in the building compared to before. Put all of that together, and you get a much fuller picture than a single stat line. You've got a quarterback who is mentally locked into the present, who treats every practice rep like new information to absorb, who is building chemistry with new weapons and a retooled offensive line, and who just had an emotional, grounding visit from his father right before delivering one of his best practices of camp. None of these pieces exist in isolation. They're feeding each other. That's why this 21 for 26 number means more than just a good day at the office. It's a data point that lines up with everything Shedeur has said about how he's approaching this camp differently, and it's landing at exactly the moment the Browns coaching staff is trying to figure out who gives them the best chance once real competition starts. And that's the piece that separates one strong practice from a real trend. Anybody can have a hot day throwing to air on scout cards. What actually gets tracked internally is whether that efficiency holds up once the rookies get comfortable, once the offensive line settles into its combinations, and once pads come on and the defense is finally allowed to hit. If Shedeur can carry anything close to 21 for 26 energy into that phase, this stops being a nice camp story and starts being a real problem for anyone counting him out of the competition.
That impacted him yesterday as he torched Brown secondary. 21 of 26 yesterday, absolutely lit it up. So today these guys get ready for practice, and then they will have a day off tomorrow, which is Sunday.
Compare that to where things stood just a few days earlier, and the shift is obvious. This isn't a guy who needed a spark. It's a guy who found one and made the most of it. Let's connect the full timeline one more time because it tells a clean story. Shedeur's father comes to Berea for the first time since summer. Shedeur is honest about how much that meant to him, but immediately separates it from what happens on the field. Reporters spend the rest of the presser trying to manufacture tension between him and Deshaun Watson, and Shedeur shuts every version of that question down without any hesitation. The person breaking down the footage says ownership itself isn't entertaining that narrative either. And then, in the middle of all of it, Shedeur goes out and completes 21 of 26 passes in practice, one of his sharpest showings of the entire camp. None of that happens by accident. It happens because Shedeur has built a routine around staying present, absorbing information, and refusing to let outside noise, good or bad, pull him off task. The father visit didn't distract him. If anything, it looks like it settled him. And with pads coming soon and the preseason slate right around the corner, that kind of week is exactly the kind of week that shapes how a quarterback competition actually plays out. Every one of these threads, the family visit, the media pressure, the mental preparation, the growing chemistry with new weapons, points back to the same conclusion. This wasn't a lucky day. It was the result of everything Shedeur has been building since camp opened, showing up on the exact day his father happened to be watching. So here's the real question heading into the next phase of camp. Do you think Coach Prime's visit is genuinely what settled Shedeur into that performance, or is this just who Shedeur is regardless of who's watching from the sideline? Drop your answer in the comments. Smash like and subscribe so you don't miss the next update once pads come on.